So we're just going to do a quick lesson on populations and growth. You're going to be able to identify the factors that affect population growth and then explain what happens during a logistic growth. So when describing populations, ecologists study populations in 3 different ways: geographic range, growth rate, density, and distribution, and then age structure. So we're going to go over all 3 of those during this lesson. So geographic range is just as it sounds. It's the places that the population lives. Reminder, you're just writing down the things that are underlined for the most part. So this is the area where that population lives, historical and current range, where the animals were and where they are now. So for our example, we have the white rhino in Africa. The yellow is the historic range of the white rhino in Africa. And then the red is the current distribution of the rhino. So that is their geographic range. So density and distribution, this is a measure of how many individuals are in an area and how they're spread out, how they're distributed. So here we have our trees. They are kind of randomly placed. Be your example over here without actual trees. And then we have our penguins. They are all kind of evenly spread out. And then you have your fish at the bottom, and those guys are clumped together. So you have uniform, which would be our penguin example. Our uniform, you see as many penguins kind of all evenly spread out. You have your clumped one right here. You have small clumps of animals. That would be your fish. And then you have your random, which is the trees that are randomly just dispersed throughout. So age structure, this is just a description of the population in terms of the age group and the sex. So in A, we're distributing it out based on the fact that we have the majority of male and females between ages of 0 and 4. And then as you go up, as you increase in age, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Another example would be kind of having that even distribution. You have the majority of your individuals being between this 30 and 39 range. You get smaller for females and then even stays larger. So it's just kind of categorizing them based off of their age group and sex. So another way to figure out population growth is based on birth rate and death rate. So if the birth rate equals the death rate, the population will stay the same. Or another way of saying that, if the growth rate is equal to 1, the population size is unchanged. Nothing is changing. If the birth rate is greater than the death rate, then the population size will increase. The growth rate is greater than 0, population is growing. If the death rate is greater than birth rate, then the population will decrease. Another way of describing this, if we don't go off of births and deaths, we could do off of immigration and emigration. So immigration is when a population is increasing if individuals move into its range. So individuals are moving into this population, so we're increasing in size. Think of immigration means in. Emigration is when a population will decrease because the individuals will exit. They are leaving the area. So this sounds super complicated. Exponential growth is really just under ideal conditions. Think about a individual or a population living in a place where they have unlimited space, unlimited food, unlimited water. Their numbers are going to increase exponentially. So basically, if you have one bacterium, it produces a cell produces 2 cells every 20 minutes under ideal. After 20 minutes, it'll divide and produce 2. After another 20, it'll divide and produce 4 because you have 2 dividing to 4. Then those 4 will divide and produce 8. Basically is using it as an exponent. In another hour, 6 20-minute periods total, there'll be 2 to the 6th or 64 bacteria. And that's kind of where you're hitting that increase. Is once you get up past 4 hours, you are going to exponentially increase because you just have so many that are dividing and reproducing. So logistic growth is a little different, and this occurs when a population's growth slows and then that growth stops. So it's going to grow rapidly. It's going to hit phase 2 where the rate slows down. So we're slowing. And then phase 3 is it stopped. The growth rate stopped. It's now increasing and decreasing at about the same speed. So the growth rate becomes 0. You have same birth, same death rate. Okay. Carrying capacity. This is just the number of individuals of a species, that an environment can support. So we don't live in ideal conditions. That's just really not possible to live in ideal conditions. So once a species reaches its carrying capacity, it stabilizes. And then if the environmental conditions remain constant, we want to kind of ignore some limiting factors if we're talking about it stabilizing and remaining constant or consistent. However, there are limiting factors. So what are some biotic and abiotic factors that could affect the carrying capacity? So that's space, food, amount of water, seasonal changes, and then food availability as well. So we said that. And there are many, many more. So just a couple of checkpoint questions that I want you to keep in mind. I'm going to have you answer one of these in the chat box or question box. So what factors determine the rate at which a population increases or decreases? What happens to the growth of the population? When does logistic growth occur? And what is the difference between population